Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Hindu Business Lines Knowledge Series. Uh, I welcome all our participants and a very warm welcome to our guest for the evening, Mr. Suresh Prabhu. He's well known to all of us here. He's been union minister in two governments. He's held most of the major portfolios related to the economy. He's been industry minister, he's been minister for chemicals and fertilizers, he's been civil aviation minister, he's been railway minister, he's been minister for environment and forests, and environment is a cause which I know is very dear to his heart. He's been, uh, the proponent of a number of uh, yeah, remarkable initiatives. One of them, I know, another initiative which is always he's held dear is the river linking project. Something which is now beginning to see some kind of fruition. A couple of projects have already happened. Um, he's a chartered accountant by profession. He's been a career banker, and really, and currently, of course, as we all know, he's uh, Sherpa to the Indian Sherpa to the G20 um, uh, during a particularly, I would say, interesting time in the history of the G20 itself. Um, and I think there is no better person to look at the issues uh, and the challenges posed by the crisis that we are all facing, not just in India, but the whole world. The challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, the uh, consequent impact on economies, both at the local and global levels. Um, and we would try over the next 50 minutes or so to sort of pick Mr. Prabhu's brains on what are the issues that are faced by the economy, relating to the economy, relating to global trade, and what is the way forward? What are the next steps? Um, welcome, Mr. Prabhu. I would like you to first perhaps share your thoughts with us, sort of set the context for the larger picture, and then maybe we can go into, a more interactive session and also take some questions. We have a very large number of participants eagerly waiting to interact with you. Over to you, sir.
So, thank you, my dear friend Srini, for giving me the opportunity. And someone who is one of the very highly respected professional journalists who has been trying to talk on many different aspects of economy through his columns, through his writings, through his involvement into economic affairs. So, thank you very much for this opportunity at a time. Then, obviously, all of us are facing one of the most difficult challenges ever faced by the world. And very interestingly, uh, Hindu Business Line and Hindu organize this. So I'm sure this could be, as you said, it's a knowledge series. This is part of our provoking ideas, only to find a solution to the problem, rather than getting into what and when and what. That's not an issue, but how do you actually come out of these very challenging times in a manner that should benefit India and Indians to begin with. Very interestingly, if you look around the world, right, from Latin America to North America to Central America to Europe to Africa to all parts of Asia and even Australia, all parts are actually facing unprecedented challenges to their own economies. And when all the national economies are facing such challenges, it is obvious that what is a global economy? This is the accumulation of all the national economies put together. Therefore, the global economy itself is facing a problem. But always it happens, if the global economy is not doing well, obviously national economies also will get affected. And national economies contribute to the global economy. So it's all interrelational issues. But I think it's a big challenge. If you really want to find out what is, can you describe this scenario? One is, it is, let's see, I can put it. one is contagious. So when one economy has a problem, even because we are so interconnected, interrelated, integrated in many areas, that even that contagious flows into others and others get affected. Like see whether 1991, when we started reforms in India, our contribution to global GDP was not as significant. And our integration, more importantly, not the numbers that come out of it by integration, but our integration was not as strong as it is today. So therefore, all of us are affected, we are affected, and therefore the contagious is a part of it. Other part is contraction. So this is what is, if you define the global economy, one is a contagious part, other see contraction. So all global economies, all the national economies, including as IMF says, the global economy, the result of that is going to be contracting. Some are contracting at unprecedented level. That their contraction maybe they're not seen even few centuries, like in UK. And therefore, European Union, of course, European Union has a very relatively smaller time frame because they have come into existence a few decades ago, but they are contracting. And US is probably saying that they've never seen a contraction. Last they probably could have seen way back in 1930, so about almost a century ago. And then we have a other problem of the economies. It is too complex. So therefore, we are finding it very difficult to understand the economic part. Because it's not very simple because it is affecting from healthcare. We started with that, got into economy, got into social issues, and therefore it's very complex to deal with. And if I can also add one more, see, it is a lot of confusion around it because the lockdowns will be lifted, normalcy will come. There's absolutely uncertainty about it, so a lot of confusion around it. So in that context, we are really facing this unprecedented challenge. But very interestingly, it is obviously this started with few months ago, earlier this year, first China, then the rest of the world. But actually, the signals for weakening of the world economy were emerging even before that. If you really look at it, the 6 out of major 7 economies were already slowing down. And therefore, the IMF had called it a synchronized slowdown, which is a phenomenon even before this COVID had started. So I can say that people say that who will affect most, who will get affected most by the corona are the comorbidity patients, those who had underlying some sort of a health problem, whether blood pressure or related to cardiac problem or blood sugar problem, diabetes. So I call it this slowdown now in the world, the contraction part is also comorbidity problem. So already the underlying weakness is already there, and now it's worse compounded by the fact that global shutdowns, slowdowns, dislocation has caused this slowdown. So this is a very, very interesting phenomena that we are facing. And again, to add to the pre-corona challenges, we are already seeing the voices, if not the action really, but the voices of protectionism growing. And they're going from such countries who are always professing to be capitalist and market-oriented economies. And they were trying to put protective walls. Countries who benefited immensely in the past by way of opening of the economies and the global economies, they were saying and posing challenge, existential threat to organizations like WTO. They were the ones who were talking about how we should renegotiate FTA. Like, for example, US renegotiated FTAs with their neighbors, Canada, Mexico, or their very close partners like Japan, Korea, European Union. And therefore, this was a new phenomena that was already growing in the world even before we actually started facing it. But today, as a result of all this, also because we had to force a lockdown on India because for good reason. And I would like to put that into perspective. See, there is no one knows a treatment, a protocol for a coronavirus. Nobody knows. In fact, nobody knows what a virus is. How does it look like? There are so many different theories, whether it is airborne or not airborne, whether by touch you get it or you don't get it. So what is the way to do it? If you don't have a vaccine, you don't have a protocol, you don't understand the exact nature of the complexities of this virus itself, you have to with lockdown. That's what we did in India. And to some extent, and to great extent, I would say that has also given us some benefit. Now it's always an issue of hindsight that you can say whether it should have gone this way or that way, but it has done. So the result of that, it has affected the economy. And as the Reserve Bank of India governor himself said, that we'll probably get into a negative territory at the end of the fiscal. And therefore, this is a challenging time. And it has posed so many challenges on us. One is a fiscal challenge itself, because the government's revenues have gone down, whether it is from GST, whether it is from corporate tax, or whether it is from imports, all of that will be affected. And not only it will be affecting the central government revenue, consequently, because now we have an integrated tax, the state governments will be affected. The state governments, one of the major revenue that get other than GST or from the central devolution from income tax and the other pool is from liquor. That is also affected because of the lockdown. So states are in trouble. And then after the 70th and the 74th amendment, we were trying to give resources to the local self-government through the State Finance Commission as well as the Public Finance Commission, the Central Finance Commission at the central level. That also will be affected. So just imagine all different layers of government, central, state, local government, revenues will be affected. Of course, the loss is not just related to government, all segments of economy, whether it is industry, whether it is services, not to that extent agriculture, but certainly services and industry are definitely affected. And the stress of this is also the banking system, because banks by nature lend money to the borrower. So banks lend normally 3 times more than what the borrower puts his own money. That's a debt equity ratio. So banks will be affected more than the borrower, and therefore banking system itself will be under stress when the banks are already facing challenges. And that's all part of our legacy issues. And therefore, the banking system will be affected. And therefore, certain sectors will be affected even more than the others, and therefore, we have to take care of them. But as you are saying, the economy need to be reoriented in any case through structural reforms. For example, the share of manufacturing or share of industry into GDP is 16%, which are to taken to 20%. In fact, we had prepared a plan. You mentioned me about Commerce Industry Minister, because when Prime Minister Modi is talking about $5 trillion economy, I had prepared a roadmap as to how that will happen. 20% share should come from industry, increasing it from 16%. Though our overall idea is to take it to 25%. When we launched Make in India program, when we started startup program, we had said 25%. We will definitely must aim to go there, but to reach 25%, we must make the first step. That's 20%. So we are prepared. But we are already seeing a structural issue, increasing share of manufacturing to create stable jobs, to ensure that we can export. Just try to understand, we must increase, and I will come to it because you have given me a very good topic to talk on, is also trade along economy. And trade and investment are also related to economy, because you cannot grow economy without trade or investment. But trade, when we come to it, I will explain that part in my opinion, what should be done. But exports has to be more from India, and to export we must manufacture. How can you export unless you manufacture something? So this increasing manufacturing share is important, which is part of a structural change, as well as manufacturing itself will pull other sectors, whether it's agriculture through food processing industry or logistic, which will be service sector, and all of that will get pulled when we have a shift of more GDP coming from manufacturing or industry, and therefore this was also waiting to happen. Also, we needed more skilled. That's why Skill in India program was launched. And very recently, very interestingly, the Apple CEO made a very interesting call that we design an iPhone in US and manufacture in China. It's a half tool. We have a different kind of human resource available in China, which made it possible. So if we develop that human resource through Skilling India program and many other programs, automatically manufacturing will also shift to India from other countries. And to do that, also part of a structural change that needed to happen. Also competitiveness and productivity, which are missing in more or less all aspects of our businesses, whether it is all aspects of economy, whether it is industry, services, or agriculture. So that also needed to be put into place. And the high cost of business, again was one of the hindrance, whether it is coming out of logistic cost, whether it's out of interest cost, or whether it is even coming out of power cost. And all of that put together was also putting us into some disadvantageous position. And that also needed to be done. So we are already had to work on certain structural changes to take economy from $2.9 trillion to $5 trillion. And to do that, these were the measures which were necessary. Unfortunately, because of Corona, now the priorities have changed because our resource constraint will happen because public finance is also under stress. And at that time, we have to come out of it. So to come out of it, we really need to work on certain sectors which can actually have a pull effect. Let's take example of three sectors only because then that will illustrate the point better. Take automobile sector, which is actually a mainstay of India's manufacturing. And old series, it was close to 48%. Now the new series of GDP, it is even 39%, but significant part of India's GDP comes from manufacturing. Most stable blue collar jobs come from this sector, but also the service sector. When you buy an automobile, whether two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, or a commercial vehicle, you need to service that vehicle. So the service sector also gets a tremendous boost. So by making this sector grow, we are putting also the other sectors' ability to pull itself out of it. Also agriculture, because say for example tractors, if you can help more, the agriculture also will benefit. The other sector, which again is very employment intensive, very labor intensive, is real estate. If you pull that sector out, that will also create demand for manufactured products, whether steel, cement, besides creating employment, also create revenues for the people. Also, for our Prime Minister vision of providing housing to all can also be fulfilled to that. Third is hospitality, tourism, and logistic, and also, of course, transport sector. To do that, you have to choose one anchor sector. For example, as I said, in automobiles, will manufacturing, you can take automobiles. Secondly, in service, which I mentioned, is real estate. Same way in this, aviation and transportation will play a key role because get tourists back into India or make tourism sector grow, which is very again very employment intensive. There are small businesses are dependent on them, and to do all that, we can actually make this particular thing to do. For that, after choosing these sectors, upstream and downstream both will benefit immensely. Like in case of, as I said, in aviation, all those who supply to aviation will benefit. All those who are downstream in terms of tourism and others will also benefit. So we should try to put in infrastructure. And Honorable Prime Minister has already announced that next thrust is going to be infrastructure investment, for which a detailed plan is worked out. Infrastructure again has an ability. While we construct infrastructure, we'll create jobs, we'll add to GDP, but infrastructure will become a platform for launching higher economic growth. And therefore, that again is to be done. That poses an issue of financing infrastructure. Financial services, incidentally, I mentioned banks, but even all other intermediaries in the financial services sector are also facing challenges. But imagine if you want infrastructure investment at a time when ability of public money going into infrastructure will be limited. So we'll have to get private sector investment. And that investment again must come in a form of long-term paper, because infrastructure would require investment which will mature after say 7-8 years is a construction period in some cases. A power plant can take 6 years to construct, depending upon environment clearances. From ground zero to make it happen, it will take that much time. But the cash flows will start coming much later. So what will happen in those 6 years is interest during construction period. Much later, cash flows will come, you can service the loan. So we need long-term paper, which can be maturing after 15, 20 years. So we need to get those funds into India. They are the ones available through pension funds. They are the ones available through sovereign wealth fund. They are available through probably, if not so much, with hedge fund. But all those funds to come to India, will have to develop a secondary market, a debt market, so that these builders of infrastructure can issue some kind of a paper which can benefit them. And to do all this, we have to make sure that, as I said, some of the weaknesses that we are seeing already in the economy and which are structural. It is not something which happened in the last 4-5 years, which are inherited for a long time, including manufacturing. So we'll have to increase Make in India program, very successful, for which Power sector will have to be made properly, because power is a very key important cost. So there, I welcome the amendments which have been made. I had introduced Electricity Act in 2002. Now we are coming with a new amendments. I welcome them because that will also make power sector more feasible, which will help possibilities of making this happen. Other aspect, an opportunity for India will be the global value chain, regional value chain, supply chains. And this again is an opportunity. And we already done that. It is not first time we are doing it. In auto, in chemicals, in leather, we are also part of a global supply chain very effectively. But to do that, we have to decide. By definition, chain is sequence of events. There are so many things happening in a chain. So when we are saying I want to be part of a supply chain, I have to choose whether I want to join supply chain at the beginning or at the end or in the middle. But wherever I join, I must acknowledge the fact that I am part of a chain. That means I have to depend on upstream and downstream on somebody who may not be necessarily in India or in my country. It may be outside. So unless I integrate with him, it will not happen. And therefore, to do that, this can boost our small scale sector immensely. And I really thank the Prime Minister for giving 50,000 for relief to the small scale sector, because that sector, there are 40 million small and medium enterprises. There are 100 million jobs, and more importantly, 45% of the exports. But to do this and to make them where, we have to make sure that we benefit from the becoming part of the global value chain, because over the last few decades, the entire global trade and global economy has undergone a sea change. The US, the Americans, and even Japanese and Koreans, they do not manufacture everything in their own soil. They which has evolved over a period of time, and therefore that evolution will happen and has become a reality. Maybe the place where they were manufacturing might, like for example, China may not be the preferred destination, but still the value chain, and therefore we have to accept that reality, that's a chain, so we'll have to work on it. And to do that, we can be part of that in electronics, in chips, in 3D printing, in medical devices. That's another big area for growth. And to do this, we can also become part of supply chain in services. And there is a possibility, and therefore you're asking what to future. In agriculture, we can also be a part of a very important element. We have only $26 billion of agriculture exports today. When I drafted the agriculture export policy, which was sanctioned under the guidance of Prime Minister Modi, we are targeted $100 billion. That includes 5 elements of agriculture, not just agriculture alone: agriculture, horticulture, dairy products, marine products, meat, and so five different products. So all of that put together can take our export to $100 billion. That can also benefit to make sure that our vision of $5 trillion economy can be reality through various measures. And I think when we talk about it, 20% of 5 trillion should come from industry, 60% should come from services, and $1 trillion, 20% should come from agriculture. To make this entire plan has been made and was ready, and of course now it will be little bit affected. But I will add another dimension to this. Besides taking these macro level measures, you must work on other aspects. How can we grow with bottoms up approach also at the same time? What I told you are macro intervention of different kinds, but micro level intervention also can happen. And therefore, we have a program called district led growth. We had chosen 6 districts in north, south, east, west, and in Himachal, one hilly district. The idea is that if those districts, and we have profiled them through National Institute of Public, rather National Council for Applied Economic Research and Indian Institute of Management, so that we can grow the GDP in that district based on local resources, local available talent, local human resource. Grow it by 3% more than the normal growth. This again can boost significantly our ability to boost rural incomes to begin with. Also to have inclusive growth, which is not an afterthought after the growth happens, but becomes integrated into development process itself. And to do this, we also try to promote GI products, geographical indications, so that those products also will get a lot of value. And to make the industry grow at a faster rate, we have a very good industrial corridors, which now we can rely on for a land bank, and that again can really hit mostly. Coming to trade, and I'll just international trade. And that is something in which we have now work on a very significant way. Today is a 42% of GDP. Actually, when we want to make $5 trillion economy, it should be at least half of that, so 50%. To do that, we have choice is to get market access, because to increase our exports, we need market access. So it can happen either through WTO, which is a threat, but we must try to revive it. It can happen through FTAs or PTS, which we should also, we have some more to find out how we can make them better for India, or we have to make sure that we can work on the basis of some old traditional measure which are completely outdated, like rupee ruble trade, or because we had a quota system which is now no longer available to us. So we'll have to work on that at a time when the remittances, and India is the single largest remittances, more than $8 billion, are under threat. People are coming back to India. So we'll have to increase our share of global trade. And to do that, we'll have to work out a strategy on investment, which is the last point that you taught. I'm saying that if you reduce import, you'll have to manufacture more, because what can you export if it is not manufactured in India? And therefore, investment driven FDIs, we should try to get them. We should also help in creating more service sector activity, which for that we'll have to, we have already identified 12 champion sectors which can grow and can happen. We'll have to take investment at a time when public investment has actually in the last few years made growth possible, which is under threat. Private investment has to come in, so we'll have to rely also on investment from outside of India, because our savings rate also has come down. And therefore, to get investment, to supplement our, we have to increase our savings rate through variety of measures, but we'll have to also ensure that we get private investment to supplement the investment. So we'll have to get even more FDI. And at the time, UNCTAD had already said that FDI was going down even before the corona happened. And therefore, we'll have to find out how we can work on the strategy to make it happen and to get investment, to get FDI. We have to create shelf for projects, wherein companies can come and invest on the basis of which the project which we want, for which we'll have to ring fence the cash flow so that there is a safety related to this. We'll have to work on removing regulations which are warranted. We need regulations, stronger regulations in environment, in healthcare, in safety, in security, national security, and labor. But that all unwanted regulation which prevent entrepreneurship to come to fore, we have to recede significantly. And now, right now, to get more investment, to get more trade, we'll have to align our geoeconomics and geopolitics together. And to do that, I think we have Prime Minister Modi, several measures that have been announced in the recent past will actually help us to come out of this sooner. There is some signs of picking up in rural areas. I was talking to some people who actually sell the products in rural areas. There are some signs of pickup. It's too early to say that, but I am saying, so we'll have to revive the economy as early as possible, for which number of measures that Mr. Modi has taken, announced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, will go a long way in addressing some of these concerns. Though, as I said, there are two issues. One of the structural issue that we are facing for a long time. So, when we talk about trade, it is internal trade also. In internal trade, you will see that there were so many restrictions. Only yesterday, the Cabinet has cleared a very important proposal to clear one national market for agriculture. Itself will help in boosting demand, creating more in the hands of the people, but also help economy to grow. So I think these kind of measures will also help. I will stop here because I know you like to ask me some questions, also the audience. But I will stop here. But thank you once again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prabhu. And I think, as usual, a very wide, sweeping overview of a number of challenges. I particularly found your point very, very interesting, comparing the economy, Indian economy in particular, to also a corona patient with pre-existing comorbidities. I think that's a very, very important point which people have not taken sufficient note of. We've been looking at the immediate impact, but we cannot forget that there have been certain challenges facing the economy even prior to the start of the pandemic. There was a slowdown in growth. growth, there has been a challenge in employment, and these challenges have only been made worse. So, if you look at the numbers in April, exports fell by 60%. And if you look at employment, we don't have very reliable data on employment, but according to the CMI numbers, roughly about 122 million jobs were lost in the month of April alone. So the immediate challenge is to revive that, and the government has, of course, as you pointed out, taken a number of steps to address the issues. But there has been some criticism of it. One is that a large part of the measures have been, through monetary measures taken by the Reserve Bank of India, which depend on the banking system for execution. So I would like you to wear your banker's hat and really look at whether our banking system is capable and willing of transmitting the liquidity taps which have been opened to the actual intended recipient. Whether it is the MSME sector, whether it is a small business, or a different kind of accommodation for the large operating businesses. The second challenge, and that's on the trade front. What is it that we can do on an immediate basis to try and see? I found your idea of picking anchor sectors in manufacturing and in services very, very interesting. I think it is really, if you start listening to everybody and try to address all problems at the same time, nothing is going to get done. So it is better to pick, say, two or three critically important sectors which have the biggest impact on employment, on value addition in the economy, and also have the ability to push growth in other sectors and focus on that. So, in this, for instance, in the trade, I think one of our critical sectors from an export point of view is the textile industry, textile apparel export industry. Are there certain steps that we could take on an immediate basis to try and push textile exports? Somebody from the audience has suggested, should we try and negotiate a GSP only for textiles, only as a temporary measure, so that the exports can revive there? Likewise, in the manufacturing sector, the other broader criticism of the measures taken is that most of them have tried to address the supply side of the problem to ensure that the manufacturing activity continues, that the firms survive the lockdown and are able to restart when, now that we have entered unlock 1, and I'm sure there will be unlock 2, 3, and 4, and so on. When that happens, that firms are actually able to sort of survive the interim period till life returns to the new normal. But one of the criticisms has been that while government has taken a number of steps to address the supply side problem, very little has been done to address the demand side. That is, how to create demand, how to get consumers back into the act of consumption, into buying things, how to put a little bit of money into their hands. As you know, there have been widespread job losses, both in the formal and informal sector. Informal sector is very visible, the migrants are going back home. But in the formal sector, there has been not only job loss, but there has been a degradation of the quality of job, in the sense people have had to face pay cuts and so on. So, the consumer mindset is a little bearish right now. So, what are the things we can do to sort of revive the consumption sentiment and revive demand? You already mentioned that, because of a good monsoon and good harvest, some demand is already picking up in rural areas. How do we make that a national phenomenon?
Number one, you mentioned about the transmission of the banking sector. See the huge
Yes.
monetary policy initiatives, and I thank Reserve Bank of India for doing that. That has to pass on to the end consumer. So it has to happen in two ways. One is the cost of borrowing, that is the interest rate, and secondly, the volume of money, that's the loans. I think banks will have to aggressively talk to the borrowers. In fact, that is something will not happen, that we cannot say that the borrower is not coming to me. I'll have to banks also have to go to the borrower and out. Where is the bottleneck? Why there is no demand for loan that is coming up. If you start talking to the borrower individually, and it's actually the banking, you're asking me to wear my previous cap as a banker, I would tell you that banking presupposes this relationship between a borrower and a lender on a personalized basis. If you don't know the lender, if you don't know the borrower as a lender, you don't know him properly, then you will never be able to understand his needs and therefore not be able to find out. I was also in the forum of cooperative bankers and those who are chartered accountants. So they are chairman of that. Though I am no longer a chartered accountant because I don't pack. I'm no longer a banker because I'm not working for any bank or not chairman of a bank, which I was. So what I'm saying is, if you start doing this, then you will definitely get it. Secondly, the transmission of interest cost. When the particularly the SME sector, there has been a huge support now, guarantees given by the government. So risk element has been completely withdrawn. So the government, actually you are lending not small scale sector, but you are lending to the government indirectly. So actually the books will go into the small scale industry, but it's guaranteed. So what is the problem? So I think we'll have to create that confidence level. Banking system itself, they can lend more and they should try to do that. I think that's what is happening now. Slowly, Reserve Bank of India as well as the Ministry of Finance is talking to them. So therefore, I am sure this will really happen in a shortage. But this is very, very critical. That flow of money should go back into the economy through the normal system, and that is what should happen. Number two, there has been a very interesting thing that has happened. That is also part of the demand. Is that some money has been directly transferred by the government in the bank accounts of the beneficiary. So whether it has gone as a welfare bill or it has even gone as case of farmers, it has been given to them as an advance money against what Prime Minister's earlier Kisan Yojana was already announced. That again is to some extent the demand creation will also happen through that measure because this is the money is making available in the hands. Thirdly, the recent hike in the procurement price also will help, and this is the record procurement this year. That means also some money will go back to them. But a banking system, you're absolutely right. The transmission part should happen more effectively. The liquidity available. Now the liquidity is available in the system. It must go back into the borrower's hands, and that is how will economy will start circulating again at a much faster rate. The second part in this anchor sector, why I was mentioning this, is because you try to understand one thing. When we say small industry, large industry, micro industries, they are all economic entities. For example, test example again of because that is the largest sector in the manufacturing, automobiles. All automobile manufacturers, they are in the large category, obviously. But they cannot do their operation on the shop floor unless supply chain, which is all small scale industry. All auto component manufacturers, if not all, almost all, you can say some may be exception, are in small scale sector. And now particularly when we are now increase the definition and redefine small scale sector, increase the limit, it will be more or less all. And those small scale companies will not be able to survive unless large companies survives because their orders will come from them. So unless we take anchor sector approach, anchor in particular sector, anchor industry approach, it help the entire industry to pick up. And major industries picking up, which are employment generating, these are all blue collar jobs. In construction, another, not necessarily blue collar, but some others, and some unorganized labor. And you directly mentioned textiles. I fully agree with you. That's another sector which needs support like this. So if you take few sectors and service sector largely, the hospitality, transport, and the allied sectors, tourism, you can take that. You'll obviously see the problem that you talk about, demand also will get addressed properly because you're addressing sectoral issues together. So I think this again can happen in a very significant way. Actually, the measures taken by government are in that same direction. I'm just saying one more dimension can be added. But actually, what Prime Minister announced, the 20 lakh crores, and then Finance Minister, through series of her announcement, she has actually provided details of that, are in that direction. We should again go in a long way. And therefore, I feel that very soon you will see a pickup that is coming up that will surely encompass other parts of it. There is always a challenge for unorganized labor. When they are gone back to the villages, it's a problem. Problem for the laborers, problem for the economy, and overall problem for everybody. But while they are there, it's possible that because of the increased allocation for the employment guarantee program, they can get some jobs there. But also this will help in when they come back. And now you must, Srini, you must appreciate one point that we always been talking about the labor, which is the cause of in our economic growth. Now we know that labor is not a problem. Labor is a part of a solution. In fact, they need to be supported. So we talk about hire and fire and others. This is not really true because now they have been fired, but they fired themselves, and now you want them back. So probably we'll have to now revisit our importance of labor as a cost of not just of production, but element of economy. They are a very key element of India's economy. So therefore, we must try to put them. So therefore, when they come back, they probably industry, service sector, even agriculture. Agriculture is also short of labor actually, because in part of India where we more like Punjab, they were in short supply. So now they will realize the importance and the contribution of labor into making economy run again. So that is good sign in a way. That is, of course, they have gone back something, but I'm sure they'll come back and we'll need to incentivize them to come back. And one incentivization would be that giving such terms which will actually make industry comfortable, but at the same time make labor also rewarded more. That again will increase demand because if the money comes in the hands of the labor will also. So I think all of this will really be a good measures to happen over a period of time. But I agree with you that we must include textile part of it into that.
Right. I've also got a number of questions on another hot topic of the day, which is China. So there are, I mean, broad questions. So one is that, you know, there is a popular movement to sort of boycott Chinese goods and so on. But as we know, there are very deep linkages between China and India on the economic front. Certain industries are very critically dependent on China for supplies of key either raw material or intermediate inputs of products so that they can manufacture. The pharmaceutical industry is a good example where a bulk of the sort of active pharmaceutical ingredients now actually comes from China. Equally true for, even the automobile sector where critical components come from China and so on. So one is that, how do we deal with China, particularly in view of the sort of sudden escalation in tensions on the border and so on. The second is that, of course, there is a global sentiment against China developing in many countries. Directly as a result of the pandemic, rightly or wrongly, China is seen as being the cause of the problem. For instance, Japan has announced a fund to help Japanese businesses move manufacturing out of China. US and China are in the middle of a full-fledged trade war. So how do we, India, take advantage of all this to try and see whether some of the manufacturing which other countries are trying to take out of China, can we bring it to India? If so, what do we need to do? How do we sort of capitalize on the sort of trade issues where there is obviously, there are certain actions being taken by large economies against Chinese imports. So how do we sort of become the substitute there? What is the way forward?
See, there are good questions. Let me put different elements of this question and then I'll try to answer. One element is the global opinion against China. Now, we have no control over it. We have no party to it. This is the global public which has emerged over a period of time for whatever reason, but it is now global thinking. If you really go through social media posts and everything else, there seems to be a regular huge backlash in China that is happening all over the world, including some leaders, global leaders, directly attacking China. And therefore, that is a one part of the global opinion that is happening. And mind you, when China emerged as a top destination for investment, it didn't happen through geopolitical or geoeconomic reasons. This happened purely through the boardrooms because they took commercial decisions to do that. But now, because of these geopolitical and geoeconomic changes that are happening, it might affect even the boardroom decisions. This is definitely possible. Secondly, in India, the public opinion, which also emanates not because of government doing anything, it happens because of public perception. And I think when people feel that they have been deprived or some countries are not being fair to India, this public opinion get built up. But now coming to the broader issue, which you mentioned about, how do we deal with that situation? I will tell you very interestingly. 2.5 years ago, as a Commerce and Industry Minister, I set up a group under chairmanship of economist Surjit Bhalla, who is today India's ED in International Monetary Fund, which also had a very distinguished. One of the members now is India's Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar. Other one was a heading McKinsey, Adil Zenulbhai. The CI Secretary General, Chandajit Banerjee was a member. Former Commerce Secretary, Rajiv Kher was a member. Many members. And I spent hours with them. Why? Because today you are seeing this global opinion turning against China, and therefore you are thinking this might happen. But there was a trade war which was going on even earlier. And I was already seeing, even before trade war, I was seeing some sort of an uneasiness about countries putting all their eggs into one basket. So I said, why not position country, India, as a country for a natural destination for investment if somebody wants to move out of China. And therefore I set up a group under these people, very distinguished people. I spent hours with them, and a report is ready. We had got it processed even before the election results came in. That actually report was submitted. We processed it also. So all different sectors have been factored into how we can benefit from those sectors. We also factored into the various possibilities of how to get it. And there are two types of investors will move out of China. One is now geopolitical reason, which you just mentioned, but also because of strong business reason. Because as it happened in case of Korea and Japan before them, that China's cost has gone up considerably. So China's per capita income is around $10,000 region. So obviously China is in a position to not to be very competitive in terms of that. The reason why they attracted investment was different, and today's situation is completely different. So there is bound to be natural moving out for business reasons. And that is what I was trying to capitalize on, to find out how we can benefit from it. And for that, I was also saying that competitors, when that investment will move out, countries like Vietnam, countries like Indonesia, countries like even Bangladesh, our neighbor, which has actually done well in that area. So how do we compete by getting something on board which those countries can offer to those potential shifter, so that we also benefit from it? So we have done all that, and that is already there. So the report is also there, and in fact, it just happened just before the results were announced. So I think, I'm sure the ministry is processing that to take it forward. But I'm saying, in China, we already had all the while only one-way traffic. That ever since we started trade with China, our trade deficit was rising. So we are very sure about if China is the largest trade partner, but also we are the largest trade deficit with China. And only time we reduced it by more than $10 billion in 2018-19, I forced them to reduce the trade deficit. So we have to work with them very aggressively and ensure that we reduce the trade deficit, and over a period of time, we also must manufacture in India so that that does not happen. But point you are mentioning, very interesting point. About some manufacturing in India, it also depends upon some of the imports from China. For example, the bulk chemicals we import from China to make formulations in India, which in turn we export to 100 countries as pharmaceutical products, generic products. So I think we'll have to, that cannot happen immediately. Some of the critical components that you mentioned are also imported from there. So we'll have to have a calibrated approach to do that. And if you look at it, it is not just about that country alone, but if you look at it interestingly, our imports are 3% of our imports of almost $4 billion are 60% are raw materials, 30% are capital goods, and 10% are consumer goods. So we'll have to calibrate it properly to ensure that our manufacturing also will not suffer. So we have to make it happen in a proper manner, but very clearly, India has an opportunity to natural shift that is going to happen of manufacturing outside the biggest manufacturer of the world. India should be the natural beneficiary of it because of we have domestic market, trained manpower, we have technological available, we have proven capability of exporting some of the fine knowledge-based products, knowledge-based industries. So therefore, I think we should be able to benefit from it quite a. To do that, also we'll have to. This will be an opportunity for us. Srini, if you like, I can put it like this: there is an opportunity for us to shift India's export market. Today, when we are exporting, we export out of 332 billion that was last year, which contracted unfortunately in 2019. But our petrochemicals and diamonds are $150 billion out of our exports, wherein hardly any value added takes place. So if we can shift manufacturing in India, you must also aim at getting such manufacturing in India which has a potential not only to cater to a domestic market, not only reduce import dependency, but also must have the ability to capture overseas market outside. So we should become, through that investment that will come from outside India into India for manufacturing, we should also become part of a global supply chain. So I think we should try to work on that. This will be a good opportunity.
Thank you. Another, issue which is propped up, and it's this. I think you'd be best positioned to answer this. Trump has sort of suddenly, mooted a proposal to make the G7 into a G11. You know, is it actually a ploy just to weaken the G20, where he feels that the other members of G20 are not listening to the US enough, or is there something where India actually stands to benefit from this? What is your view?
See, firstly, India is part of G20 not by necessarily by invitation, but because of their own intrinsic strength. India is now the fourth, fifth largest economy of the world, one of the top manufacturers of the world. So rightly so, by qualification, India is a member of G20. It was invited for a G7 summit last when it held in Biarritz in France. When France was a presidency of G7, India was invited to be a member, and Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in fact, made some very key important component, the contribution to the G20 summit. For example, digital economy. He was the lead speaker of the G7, and he made a very interesting comment, which is now appreciated by everybody, that some of the digital products should be for global public good, which is a very important element, so that digital connectivity will happen, digital design will happen. And now, particularly after pandemic, when we need more digital connect, you can imagine the prophetic word of Prime Minister Modi, which is actually going to benefit a lot. So G7 has been a grouping when G20 was still there. So it's not that G7 now they are suddenly trying to. It's not that G20 and G7 coexisted. G7 was there, of course, G8 before. Then Russia went out, so remained G7. And now, when President Trump, now he's actually the US currently is a presidency. They run the presidency for G7, so they invited India to join. So it's a great honor for India, but also recognition of India and Prime Minister Modi as a leader, whereby that invitation has come to us because both the stature of India rising and Prime Minister leadership in India getting acknowledged. That shows that G7 has a relevance of a different kind. G20, of course, will continue to be there. And in fact, in 2022, just a year from now, India will be hosting the G20 for the first time in year 2022, which incidentally is India's 75th year of independence. So it's actually a very important landmark for India. And that time we'll be getting it, so we can actually be presiding over the G20 grouping in such a manner that we can also showcase to them what India has traveled a long distance in the last 75 years through democratic means. India would have crossed $3 trillion mark by then. So we would have become on our own strength through democratic norms. But such as economy itself will be for peace to appreciate, and therefore India would be doing that. So I think this is an invitation, which is recognition of India's growing cloud, acceptance of Prime Minister Modi's leadership globally. So I think this is a good beginning.
Thank you. We are coming towards the end of our allotted time, but there have been, of course, a number of questions just phrased slightly differently. But this is, I think, a very common question which is puzzling a lot of people. They're saying that if the economy is in such a difficult position right now, And if the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown has been so severe, why can't the government simply print more money and put it in the hands of the people, in the sense that why is it still worrying about a deficit when the economy is in a state of collapse? That's broadly the thrust of the question. See, why can't we just ignore the FRBM Act and simply go ahead and spend our way out of trouble? Is that possibility? More specifically, is that, as we have discussed earlier, a lot of the measures have been sort of monetary in nature, and to a greater or lesser extent depend on the banking sector to execute. Now, the banking sector is stressed itself. It is under a lot of pressure, at least for another year or two. Just government had started, with the recapitalization and then merger of certain banks in the PSUs. It has just started the process of sort of consolidating and strengthening the sector. But it's a work in progress. एक दो साल तो लगेगा उसमें. Then the bond market is very weak, the Indian corporate bond market. And there have been a rash of ratings downgrade, not only of the country, but also of individual issuers by the rating agencies. So how are we how are we then to fund the revival? It is okay. The economy, the investments have to happen, capex has to go up, demand has to be revived. But how are we to fund the revival?
See, this is revival is a part of a entire package which Prime Minister announced, which is huge. 20 lakh crores is not small amount, partly from monetary sources, partly from fiscal sources, and also addressing those touch points which are most suffering today, like small scale industry, like the migrant laborers, like the economy, like the farmers. If you really look at it, these are the people who are numbers. If you take, they would be more than 19% of the India's population. Actually, if you really look at them, because directly, indirectly, small scale sector. If they benefit from it, obviously the benefit will go to those who own it and those who are employed by the small scale companies. So they will also benefit immensely. Now, cash transfers also happen in case of some of these sectors, some of these people, and there actually. But to the point that you're mentioning about bond market is very, very critical. We really need to develop India's debt market, a bond market, particularly for infrastructure. There is enough money available in the world. In fact, it will be very interesting to know the availability of money in the world, which is very interesting. We have almost $120 trillion of funds, which actually involve all put together, whether they are pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, whether they are hedge funds, or whether private equity funds, or they are asset under management generally. So that much money is available. So that, particularly today, the money was available already, but with the liquidity pump into the global market, unprecedented. We put in more than India's GDP as a first tranche, $3.25 trillion as first tranche. And now Democrats have passed the bill in the Congress for $3 trillion more. The European Union, in addition to national members, European Union members putting in money, Pan-European Union also trying to put in package. So money is available. Central banks have reduced rates to such a low cost so that money can flow into India provided we do it properly. At a time when getting FDI also is going to be challenged. So bond market is very important because we are already seeing a slowing down of FDI globally. In fact, there has been UNCTAD survey, which has been saying that there are cross-border FDI had dropped to 30%. So bond market offers a great opportunity because what we want is money which can finance debt in a very efficient way and a cost-effective way, because that money can come little bit of cost-effective way because of low cost. So we have to structure it properly. We have to develop instruments properly, and that again can benefit immensely the growth of economy. Because if we get more investment, see that the key word is investment. If you can invest more, automatically investment will lead to so many activities. I'll give an example. When I was the railway minister, I invested, started maybe 5.4 lakh, 8 lakhs, 46,000 crore budget. I had done through one of the top agency that amount of jobs that were created because of investment that was made in railway. So this is true for roads. When Mr. Nitin Gadkari was making investment in roads or ports, the Prime Minister entire vision of investment-led growth can actually create jobs and can restart the economy in a very big way. So I think what we really need to do is to find out the bottlenecks. That's why I said a bunch of things which we can be offered. Bond market, which the question asked very correctly, so important, and all of that put together can revive the economy in a significant way. I think so. Start, and if you say I want to, if you're cyclone, then you cannot fix all problems at the same time. So you have to work on this. So I think these are the limited openings that we have. The anchor sector approach, the banking system, which is so important, the investment infrastructure, all of that will lead to, over a period of time, we'll see a revival coming back into the Indian economy. And I think for geopolitical reasons and other key elements of that also help us in a significant way. So I think we are on the right track to do that. Of course, I know there has been a very painful experience for everybody, and nobody is happy about it, nor the government, nor the corporate sector, nor the individual. Everybody has suffered as a result of this. But this was an inevitable decision to save lives of people, because there was no choice that if we had not saved the lives, what is the use of our society? Forget government. As a society, we should try to take care of a fellow citizen. In fact, Mahatma Gandhi has to say that how can I sleep in peace when I know my neighbor is sleeping without any food? So that is what is the message. That we must make sure that we must save the lives to begin with. That's what is been done. Now we'll save the economy, and I'm sure over a period of time we'll see when Srini will invite me for the next edition. We'll be discussing how the growth was made possible rather than thinking how we should be suffering. So I think no pain, no doubt about it. Let's accept the reality.
Thank
We are
you.
going to pass through some difficult times. I am sure about it. But at the same time, there's a clear message coming from Prime Minister Modi that we are with you. We'll try to address your challenges. And government is what is government? It's an agent of the society. God problem we don't want to pass on to the society. That's why this very pragmatic, very careful fiscal management is happening by the government. So I think you must give credit to Prime Minister Modi, Finance Minister Sitaraman for making this happen, and also a coordinated effort with a central bank. And Shashikanta Das, who is a very seasoned bureaucrat earlier and now handling it. So I think this is, we are trying to do it. But I know it's not an easy path for anybody. It was a difficult times, and we are trying to come out of it.
Thank you very much. And in fact, you anticipated and answered my last question. I was going to ask you, how optimistic are you about the future? And you're clearly very, very optimistic. You already said that when we meet again, we'll be talking about how the growth was revived. So that's a very, very positive outlook, I must say, and a good note to sort of end this really interesting discussion. I would like to thank you once again, sir, for sparing so much of your valuable time and sharing your thoughts with us. It's been a wonderful opportunity. I would like to thank our audience and participants, several hundred of them who've been watching it live, either on the Zoom call or through our live channel on YouTube. I would like to thank our sponsor for this event, the Indian Institute of Plantation Management in Bengaluru. Interesting people, and they are sort of doing interesting work in sort of educating, in professionalizing the plantation sector. So thank you to the IIPM. Just for our viewers and listeners, we are trying to do these series of knowledge, what we call the knowledge series interactions. We try to do at least one or two every week. Do keep a lookout. We will try to bring you the most interesting speakers on the most topical subjects, and hopefully all of us will gain something from these interactions, which we can implement in our own businesses and actions. Thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you very much. All the best. Thank you.